Thank you all very much for coming along this evening. There isn't a feedback there, is there? No, good. This evening, I know the 45 slot on a Monday in week 13 is a bit of a stretch for most of us, so we really appreciate you attending here today. What we have is a showcase of some of the work that we've been doing in the European Centre for the Study of Hate over the last 6 months or so. We're first going to present findings of a report, the Public Understandings of Hate Crime Report, which is a report conducted with our colleagues in Northern Ireland. Dr. Kevin J. Brown is here from Queen's University Belfast. We're going to be presenting some of the findings of that. Then our students are going to be presenting from the findings of their research that they conducted as part of the Advanced Lawyering Project. And then finally, Professor Nora Lee Kennedy, Vice President of Research, is going to be launching a new really exciting series that we have just started at the Centre. Without literally any further ado, I would like to invite Amanda and Kevin up to... wrong slides, apologies. To present the findings of our report. Let me just, that might be easier. Off you go.
Thank you, Jenny. And I'm delighted to be here. And it's great being, as a representative from Queen's, to be collaborating with such excellent colleagues from the University of Limerick. So I'm going to introduce the project and talk a little bit about the initial results, and then I'll be handing over to Amanda to complete the presentation. Here we go. Maybe this way.
I'll do it.
Oh yeah.
And you
great.
talk.
Okay, no worries. Or if it's just using that, I can do that. Yeah,
you
grand.
can do that too.
If this isn't working, grand. So, in introducing the presentation and the research, what was the purpose of it? Well, we were looking at responding to increases in recorded hate crime, and this is increases not just in the Republic of Ireland, but in Northern Ireland and indeed wider afield as well. And there has been increasing policy attention around this in both jurisdictions, and indeed, if you look at the UK and Ireland as a whole, there's been reviews of hate crime in all of the various jurisdictions on these islands and different responses to those reviews. And indeed, legislation is being currently considered in the Republic of Ireland, and we haven't quite reached that stage yet in Northern Ireland, but we have had the independent review which has recommended changes. So we thought it was timely to do research on this important subject, not just because it was in the political consciousness and being debated in the media, but because it's a pressing social matter as well. So this was going to be the first survey of public attitudes to hate crime, North and South, the first All-Ireland survey. So in terms of how we did that and the methodology, we'll talk about that in the next slide, how we managed to get a representative sample from both jurisdictions. But before we get on to the methodology, I want to talk about, just to highlight our funders and to thank our funders, so the Irish Research Council, New Foundations Programme, and the Department of Taoiseach Shared Island Initiative. And this report is the first output of the project, and there will be many more to come, both policy-related and academic papers. And just another wee shout-out to our funders. There we go. So it was a mixed methodology that we used. So the primary tool was the conducting of surveys. We did a survey in the north, where I'm from, and a survey in the Republic of Ireland, where our colleagues in Limerick are. And we used, in terms of getting the representative sample, it was samples of 1,000, and these were weighted to ensure the representativeness in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. They were conducted at the same time, independent surveys, but conducted at the same time between the 16th and the 22nd of February 2023, so relatively recently. In terms of the secondary research instrument or methodology, We also had a seminar was held with experts from across the island, north and south, and we looked at and discussed with them the preliminary research data and had their input into their thoughts, particularly and bringing forward their expertise and their knowledge of hate on the ground to inform our final paper. So we're going to break this discussion of the findings down into several sections. Social distances and prejudice is the first section we're going to look at. So when you look at analysis of prejudice or tolerance or acceptance, one way of doing this is through comfort surveys and asking those who are surveyed, participants, what their level of comfort is with individuals representing particular or hailing from particular identity groups. And how this survey worked is 10. It was scoring from 0 to 10 in terms of comfort levels, and 10 was completely comfortable, and 0 completely uncomfortable. And you can see there, just in case your eyesight isn't as good, same as my good self, but the gold, or the yellow, is the Republic of Ireland, and the purple is Northern Ireland. In terms of us choosing the colours for this presentation, and indeed the paper itself, we took a lot of time to think about it because we couldn't really go, like, for example, green and orange. We had to be careful what colours we chose. So we thought they were the most neutral that we could go with, while still providing a good contrast. And so you can see there, in terms of those initial groups, older persons, disabled persons, GLB, different skin colour, different religion, and there is a lot of similarity, not just within the Republic of Ireland or the Northern Ireland in terms of attitudes and levels of comfort with those groups, but across the jurisdictions of the island. Northern Ireland tended to be marginally ahead, just. With transgender persons, there was a drop in levels of comfort, and it's down to 8.3 and 8.7 there, respectively, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And then as you see, a noticeable drop when it comes to members' attitudes to levels of comfort with members of the traveller community. And it's most notable in the Republic of Ireland, but you can see it there in the data for Northern Ireland as well. And then in terms of the average comfort with a family member, so when you're asked specific questions about average comfort with a family member who's hailing from one of those groups, you can see there how the results pan out. And again, it's what you're getting for older persons, disabled persons, GLB, different skin colour, different religions, similar results within the jurisdictions and across the jurisdictions, again with Northern Ireland marginally ahead in terms of those levels of comfort. And then a drop here, we see a more noticeable drop in this family member comfort with a family member from the transgender community, a transgender person, both in Northern Ireland and the Republic, with the Republic being lower, and a member of the travelling community was the community where there was the lowest level of comfort from survey respondents. And again, the Republic of Ireland noticeably lower there as well. We also asked in the survey for the Republic specific questions in relation to people, levels of comfort with people from Northern Ireland. And we broke it down, so the question was initially apolitical, so a person originally from Northern Ireland, comfort as a family member, and then we attached a political identity to it as well. So you can see there, a person from Northern Ireland who is a nationalist, Republican, and then a person from Northern Ireland who is a unionist, loyalist. And obviously this was only asked in the Republic of Ireland because it was attitudes to people in the Republic to Northern Ireland. And you can see there when it was an apolitical person, where we didn't ascribe political identity to them, there was a high level of comfort there with a family member hailing from Northern Ireland at 8.9. And then it drops whenever you attach political identity to it. So it drops most where it's most pronounced where that person's political identity is unionist or loyalist. And we thought that was an interesting survey question or set of questions to put in, because we're looking at this idea of a shared island, and it was the Shared Island Initiative that was funding the work. In Northern Ireland, we, in terms of for employment legislation and for a whole host of other equality provisions, everyone in Northern Ireland is identified as belonging to a particular community. So we have Catholic community, Protestant community, and neither. It's important to understand that that's cultural more than a religious belief. So if you were raised within the nationalist Catholic community, you would identify as being a member of the Catholic community. Unionist, Loyalist, the Protestant community doesn't. And then if you really don't identify with either, and there's a growing number, you would be identified as neither. And this is important in terms of, for equality legislation, for example, all employers that have a certain number of employees must record and maintain records of the community background. It is a way of combating discrimination by employers against communities, particularly the Catholic community. So the concept is readily understood in Northern Ireland. Everyone knows when you say different community, what you mean by that. Although we did provide a definition in the survey as well, but in some ways you wouldn't have to. And you can see there levels of comfort, though it's reassuring as someone who comes from Northern Ireland and who grew up during the Troubles, to see there the level of comfort for someone from a different community to you was very high at 9.4. So reassuring 3 decades after the peace process, and despite the trouble that and the strife that we have politically, that the public seem to have moved on significantly. In terms then of legal responses to hate crime, another aspect of the survey was asking people which of the following groups should be protected by hate crime legislation. And of course, we had the surveys north and south again, so just a reminder, the gold is the Republic, purple is Northern Ireland. And again, you notice across a majority of the categories there very similar results north and south, and very similar results within the jurisdictions. So transgender people, black people, GLB, Muslim, there you're seeing almost identical figures, north and south and across the jurisdictions. Traveller community, again, we see a drop. So it's an important observation. We noticed that in the levels of comfort questions as well. Older people, interestingly, there was a noticeable difference there between the north and the south. Disabled people, again, similar to the other initial categories that I mentioned. Jewish people, similar, a little bit lower in the Republic. Political beliefs might seem a strange one to ask, but discrimination on political beliefs is prohibited in Northern Ireland, and it falls under equality and discrimination legislation. That would seem alien to most jurisdictions, that you can't, if someone held what they might believe to be abhorrent political beliefs, that you couldn't decide to, for example, reject their custom in a hospitality basis. But in Northern Ireland, that would be a breach of equality provisions. And indeed, if you remember the cake case in Northern Ireland, that was a relevant consideration that the UK Supreme Court had to tackle. And it wasn't something the UK Supreme Court was necessarily familiar with, because in England, Wales and Scotland, political beliefs is not a protected characteristic. It's unique to Northern Ireland. So it's not surprising there that the people in Northern Ireland were more likely to want to see political beliefs protected than in the Republic. Community background, I've explained what that means in the previous slide, but again, it's reassuring to see that in the north, in Northern Ireland, there's high support for that falling under hate crime legislation. Which of the following should be treated as a hate crime by the criminal justice system? So for the lawyers amongst us, and indeed the non-lawyers, I'll give a brief overview of this. So there's different ways. Whenever you introduce hate crime legislation, in terms of defining when you have identified hate or not, whether the legislative threshold has been met, for the police, for the prosecution, for the courts, there's different tests that can be used, and different jurisdictions will use different tests. So there are the four primary or principal tests are outlined there. Was motivated by prejudice against the victim's group. So the attack, for example, or the criminal damage, attack on the person, criminal damage was motivated by prejudice against the victim's group. The second one there, used prejudiced language to get towards the victim's group when committing the crime. So someone assaults someone and uses an offensive slur because of that person's perceived or actual membership of a particular group. Then we have the discriminatory selection definitions, the 3 and 4. They choose their victim because of the group the victim belongs to. And number 4, they chose their victim because they perceive people from the victim's group as easy targets. In terms of the legislation in the North and in the UK more generally, because we do have existing hate crime legislation, unlike the Republic of Ireland, where it's in progress, for now anyway, was motivated by prejudice against the victim's group, and the second one used prejudiced language as what are the two alternative definitions that are found within the legislation throughout the UK. And it's the proposal in the Irish legislation is to follow that approach. But it's interesting, we wanted to find out, yes, were those two favoured approaches, were they supported by survey respondents? And certainly the first one was, by high numbers, similar results north and south. The second one was less so, particularly in the Republic. So it's interesting that despite the fact that those two are often used in tandem together in jurisdictions, again, the UK being a primary example, that there was a difference in public attitudes to those two. And then the discriminatory selection one, actually, despite not being popular with legislators or governments, did find favour with the general public, north and south, particularly the third one there, 79 in the Republic and 88 favoured it in the north. And a lower rate, although still a clear majority in favour of the fourth definition being used as well. So I think that is an interesting implication in terms of looking at which tests are used or not used, and why policymakers make the decision that they do, because it's not necessarily being informed by public opinion. In terms of the Northern Ireland independent review of hate crime legislation, which hasn't yet been implemented, it was recommended to have all 4 tests introduced to legislation, but we don't have draft legislation yet in Northern Ireland. And then hate crime beliefs. So the amount of hate crime in your jurisdiction has increased or decreased. You can see the results. Again, gold, the Republic of Ireland, the purple, Northern Ireland. It's interesting, well, clearly what the commonality is, that the majority believe that hate crime is increasing, not decreasing. It was more so increased a lot. You can see that the Republic of Ireland, and there was a noticeable difference there with the Republic of Ireland 39 and Northern Ireland 24, although that's somewhat balanced by the fact that increase somewhat is higher in Northern Ireland. But in terms of perceiving there to be a decrease in hate crime, very small numbers north and south. And how serious a problem is hate crime in your jurisdiction? You can see there, in terms of the pattern, very similar north and south. So a very serious problem or a serious problem, there you've got a clear majority perceiving hate crime to be a serious problem, either serious or very serious in both jurisdictions. And in terms of those perceiving it not to be a problem, only 4% in both jurisdictions. So we're clearly dealing with an important issue to the general public. And then hate crime is a very serious problem for which of the following groups? Again, gold for the Republic, purple for Northern Ireland. And you can see it's kind of descending there in terms of perceptions. So transgender people, it's perceived to be both north and south, particularly serious problem there with over 2/3 in both jurisdictions perceiving that to be the case. Then dropping black people, GLB, Muslim, the traveller community, although they're not the lowest ranked category for this particular question, but certainly significantly lower. You can see they're noticeably lower than the transgender community of black people or GLB. Then older people, that might be people perceiving that hate crime doesn't necessarily affect older people, as opposed to not perceiving discrimination more widely against older people. disabled people, I thought that was particularly a striking result there, because is it that when people were answering this question, they were considering how much hate crime there was in society directed at these particular groups, or how impactful such hate crime might be? And we're still working to unpack that. But it struck us as interesting that was lower. The same for the Jewish community. In terms of political beliefs, we asked it in both jurisdictions, but clearly people are more familiar with the concept of discrimination on grounds of political beliefs and crime being motivated by hostility to someone's political beliefs in Northern Ireland and the Republic. So I think it's understandable you would see a striking difference there. And then we asked only the community background question in the Republic of Ireland, in Northern Ireland, because it's only relevant as a concept in Northern Ireland. And again, people, they're perceiving it to be a problem or serious problem. Over 3/4 of people continue to perceive that as a problem or serious problem in Northern Ireland. And I'm going to now hand over to Amanda.
Thank you. We are using the arrow buttons, is that right, Kevin?
Or the down on the mouse.
Down on the mouse, that's brilliant. And I should clarify that our wonderful intern Val has clarified that we are in fact using the Wexford colours of mauve and gold, or purple and gold, yeah. So there is a happy result of our lack of knowledge about sports. Right, so I'm going to talk a little now about the people's perceptions of the effectiveness of hate crime legislation. And one of the promises or potential of hate crime legislation internationally is seen to be its communicative function, that it has a symbolic role in terms of communicating to society, to potential perpetrators, and also to victims and potential victims, that society regards this as a red line issue, right? So this question was tapping into the issue of whether or not the public perceive that hate crime legislation can have this symbolic or communicative function. And here we see that there is a strong perception that, in fact, hate crime legislation can and does send a message that society does not tolerate hate crime. Now, what is interesting then is if we compare this to the public's perception of the potential of hate crime legislation to deter hate crime, right? And here we see that the public are not at all convinced that this symbolic or communicative function will translate into actually deterring hate crime from happening. Very low levels of agreement there. And then we ask a question that's maybe more a little tapping into specific deterrence. And so here we're asking, would the harsh punishment of hate crime offenders decrease the likelihood of future hate crime offending? And again, here we can see much more uncertainty than we saw in respect to the symbolic or communicative function of hate crime, with actually only a very small majority of the public actually agreeing that this is the case. Okay. We also asked about the effectiveness of current criminal justice responses to hate crime. So we asked, first of all, about the public's perception of the effectiveness of the police's response to hate crime. And of course, in the Republic of Ireland, although we don't have hate crime legislation, the police do have strategies to address what they now refer to as hate crime and previously referred to as crimes with a discriminatory motivation. And this is something that they have been specifically addressing through internal policy since the early 2000s. So actually they have been far ahead of the legislation. But when we asked people if they thought that the police were responding effectively to hate crime, you can see there in both jurisdictions that the majority of people do not agree or strongly agree with that the police are responding effectively. What is also interesting here is that people are in fact more negative in Northern Ireland, where there is a legislative framework to guide criminal justice responses. And then the situation in relation to the court's responses is even more negative again. And you can see there a small minority of people actually agreeing or strongly agreeing that the courts currently respond effectively to hate crime. Now, Feeding on from that, and I think maybe some of those responses in relation to the court will become clearer as we do some of this fact-checking, we did specifically want to explore what is it that the public know about current criminal justice responses to hate crime in both jurisdictions. And this, I think, is an especially important area of questioning because in the debates that are happening publicly and politically in both jurisdictions, either about introducing legislation or about legislative reform, there is a lot of misinformation and I think even arguably disinformation about this particular topic. So one of the things that we really wanted to do with this project was to provide a baseline of information about what do the public know on the subject of criminal justice responses to hate crime. So these were statements that were provided to respondents and they could respond true or false. Okay? So here we said the jurisdiction has hate crime legislation, and 43% of respondents in the Republic of Ireland believe that this statement is true. We do not have hate crime legislation in this jurisdiction, but 43% of people believe that we did. And that was something that was not surprising to me because every year I teach classes on hate crime and every year my students are surprised that we do not have hate crime legislation in this country, particularly given, I think, that the construct has such transnational currency. In Northern Ireland, worryingly, where the hate crime legislation is well bedded down, only 56% of people correctly believed that the jurisdiction did, in fact, have hate crime legislation. Now, the next statement was, you can report a crime to the police as a hate crime. Now, as I mentioned, in Ireland, although we don't have hate crime legislation, you can, in fact, report a crime as a hate crime to the police, and they can, in fact, record it as a hate crime. And 62% of people in the Republic of Ireland were aware that this was the case. We would like, obviously, if that statistic was higher, given that this facility is available to people. But it compares quite favourably to Northern Ireland, where, again, in the context of having a legislative framework, 72% of people believe that this statement was true. So almost a quarter of people not being aware that this was a possibility. So that was in relation to reporting, and then in relation to recording, 62% in the Republic of Ireland knowing again that you could not only report but record, and 83% of people in Northern Ireland knowing that the police could record a crime as a hate crime. Now, we move on to the courts in figure 19. So the statement provided here is that an offender can have a hate crime offence on their record. And in actual fact, this is not true in either jurisdiction, okay? Because in the Republic of Ireland, while judges can address the hate element of crimes largely on a discretionary basis, although there are some differences in relation to racist elements, in Northern Ireland, while there is an aggravated sentencing model, this means that the sentence may be higher, but the hate element or the hate aggravation will not actually appear in the charge. It won't actually appear on the offender's criminal record, okay? And so in the Republic of Ireland, 41% of people incorrectly believed that an offender could have a hate crime offence on their record. In Northern Ireland, 57% of respondents incorrectly believed that this was true, okay? And again, so there is maybe a lack of understanding around the nuances of how the legislation operates in practice. Now, one of the issues that was really important to us was to try to understand how this label of being a hate crime offender might impact upon the life course of a person who was convicted of an aggravated offence. And one of the reasons why this is really important is because Northern Ireland is going through a legislative reform process. We are in the process of a bill passing through the final stages of the legislative process in Ireland, although what happens with that is anybody's guess at this point, I think, politically. Particularly in the case of Ireland, the bill provides for aggravated offences, right, using both the motivation test that Kevin talked about earlier and also the demonstration test. And so this would mean that it would be possible for a person to be convicted of a hate crime, an aggravated offence, a hate crime charge effectively, and the hate aggravation would appear on their criminal record. Okay, so it was important to us to understand how might this impact upon the convicted person's life course, particularly in the context of questions around fair labelling, which is something that we're writing with Luke about at the moment. So here, we looked at the question of employability. How would the label of hate crime offender impact upon somebody's future employability? Okay? And so the first set of data, the gold data, comes from the Republic of Ireland. And we asked people here, if you were an employer, how comfortable would you be hiring somebody with a conviction for either criminal damage, and actually the specific example that we gave somebody was basically vandalism. So we made it very accessible for people. And we also chose to pick an offence that would be covered by the legislation, but also one that maybe wasn't as emotive as an offence against the person. So that was the logic behind that. So we asked people about criminal damage, and then we asked people about a person with a conviction for hate-involved criminal damage. And what I just want you to focus on here is just the data for very uncomfortable. Just look at the change in the data there. So if a person was an employer and they were hiring somebody with a conviction for criminal damage, 29% would be very uncomfortable with that. If it was a conviction for hate-involved criminal damage, 53% would be very uncomfortable. That's a really big shift in the level of discomfort, or the number of people who are very uncomfortable, very discomforted by that possibility. And then in Northern Ireland, we see the same type of change, even more extreme in fact, with 24% of respondents being very uncomfortable hiring somebody with a conviction for criminal damage, increasing to 61% being very uncomfortable where it's a conviction for hate-involved criminal damage. Now, we also asked a question on social distance, okay? And what this taps into is the potential for social reintegration. Employment is really important to reintegration, but so is the capacity for people to be accepted back into the community. So we asked people, how comfortable would you be having a neighbour with a conviction for criminal damage and then hate-involved criminal damage? Again, just look at the data for very uncomfortable. For criminal damage, 39% of people very uncomfortable having a neighbour with a conviction for criminal damage in the Republic of Ireland. This increases to 55% if it's a hate crime. In Northern Ireland, 35% very uncomfortable having a neighbour with a conviction for criminal damage. This increases to 68% when it is a hate crime. So here we see the significance of aggravated offences versus aggravated sentencing in terms of the implications for the life course of the convicted person, and the importance of the evidentiary tests that we use if we are going to introduce aggravated offences. Right, so we're coming towards the end now, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the recommendations emanating from the project. And these recommendations very much drew upon that expert seminar that we held, where we brought together people from civil society, people from state agencies, government departments, all coming together to talk about the implications of the findings of this research for how we might tackle hate crime on an all-island basis. And these recommendations are very much reflective of the collective suggestions of our research group and the experts to whom we spoke. So first of all, one of the things that we recommend is the formation of an all-island community of practice for countering hate. So one of the things I think that you can see from the data is the incredible similarities on an all-island basis in terms of how we view the problem of hate. And therefore, there is clearly a lot of opportunities for collaboration and collective problem solving and solution development in that context. As part of that, we would like to see, and many of the experts spoke to the importance of, an initiative that is specifically focused on the redirection and rehabilitation of people who are convicted for crimes involving a hate element. it is really important that in addressing hate crime, what we do not do is to create more hate crime offenders or more ideologically committed hate crime offenders. As part of that, we would particularly like to see a focus on restorative justice options for people who engage in hate crime. We also recommend a cross-border public information campaign. I think one of the things that was evident from the fact-checking is that even in Northern Ireland, where the legislation is bedded down, there's still a lot of misinformation publicly about the criminal justice responses that are in place. And in the context of a really important political and public debate that's happening in Ireland, a lot of misinformation about what is already available to the public. And this research really provides the basis for addressing that. We also recommend a public education campaign. So one of the things that really struck us in looking at some of the real positives of the data coming out of this research, particularly the high levels of comfort with difference and diversity that we were seeing in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, is that there is so much noise publicly about diversity. And a lot of it is not founded in evidence about the existence of public intolerance. It's maybe a minority of people who are extremely loud, right? And the potential of this research is to counter that noise and to say, well, here is research that actually shows that we have 2 jurisdictions where there are high levels of comfort towards diversity and inclusion. Now, at the same time, I think it is clear that this isn't equally experienced by all groups, particularly people from the transgender community and also travellers. And also what the research shows is that there is a real issue in terms of our perceptions, I think, in the Republic of Ireland of people from different communities in Northern Ireland, and a need to bridge those gaps. And so we would also recommend on that basis an all-island programme for fostering intergroup contact. One of the things we know about countering prejudice is that the more platforms that you have for positive social contact between people, the more difficult it is to sustain myths and prejudices about those groups. We also have always seen this research as being the first iteration in a longitudinal project. And I think that as we see the political climate change, as we see the legislative framework change, this will be really important data in terms of providing a baseline to track how public opinion, public perception and public knowledge is changing over time as well. We specifically focused on hate crime in this research, which is an extremely important topic and one that impacts upon individuals, communities, and society. Hate speech is also an important issue, and one which arguably is even less well understood by the public. We would argue that there is a need for a separate and additional piece of research of this type on public understandings of hate speech. So the next steps for this project, I think, as Kevin said at the start, this piece of research was just the first output. We are now focused on drilling further into the data and trying to understand some of the nuances and the differences between people who hold particular positions and how that gives us better understandings of the way that we can develop and target measures and interventions to create a more inclusive shared island for all of us. So there will be lots more to come in the future, and many of those pieces will be further collaborations with other individuals outside of the initial research team. So we see this as being something that will continue to bring the University of Limerick and Queen's University Belfast together, and hopefully draw in more faculty members to that project as well as we move forward. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amanda, and to Kevin. And I should say Kevin is horribly jet lagged because he literally just flew in from Canada yesterday. So thank you to Kevin particularly for being here. The report itself that Amanda referenced is available on our website, and you can access the website through our fancy QR code, which is on the banner over there. The next thing that I'd want to do, and I'm delighted that Professor Norley Kennedy is here, she is going to be launching our new series, the Research for Action series here at the European Centre for the Study of Hate. And it is such a privilege and a delight to us that the first output and the first research report in this series is a student-led project, which came from the Advanced Lawyering project from the fourth year Law Plus students, and they are here to present the findings of their research. So I'd welcome them up. Thank you to Isabel, Jenna, William and Rory, who are going to present the findings in brief of their report. And thanks also as well to our ADR for facilitating this event and for we didn't pay for Kevin to come all the way from Canada, but we're getting him back to Belfast.
Hi, this report was part of a semester-long project run by the School of Law at the University of Limerick. Under the supervision of Professor Jennifer Schweppe, we completed a mid-cycle analysis of 23 countries within the Council of Europe on their good practices in addressing hate crime. We did this using the Council of Europe Committee of Experts on Hate Crimes draft recommendation of the Committee of Ministers to Member States on combating hate crime, alongside the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, or ECRI's, country monitoring reports from its sixth cycle. Each of us examined different areas of the draft recommendation and then found examples of the good practices within these areas across the 23 countries. Isabel looked at victim support, I looked at criminal justice systems, William looked at monitoring and third-party reporting, and Rory looked at prevention. I'll now pass you to Isabel to talk about victim support.
Okay, so I'll start with victim support. So the Council of Europe Committee has taken proactive steps by proposing several recommendations aimed at combating hate crime in the area of victim support through its general policy recommendations. And the following slides will outline just a few short examples from our report of some of the best practices adhering to the victim support recommendations seen by these 23 member states. So first we'll have a look at paragraph 11 of the draft recommendation. Now this focuses on providing targeted and specialised support services to victims. So some good practices in this area can first be seen implemented by Hungary, as they introduced the first public victim support service for victims of hate crime in 2017. This was then expanded to 10 different services across the country and included a free victim helpline along with an opt-out system which has been offering individuals direct aid since 2021. Estonia also implemented action to reflect this guideline by amending their Victim Support Act in 2017 to strengthen support services available to victims of hate crime. As well as this, in 2019, they set up a helpline to support these victims. Next, we'll take a look at paragraph 13, which works to ensure the needs and rights of victims during criminal justice processes. Some of the best practices in this area can first be seen by Germany and Belgium, as they implemented firewalls to prevent schools, doctors and instructors from reporting irregularly present migrants in order to safeguard the essential rights of these individuals. France and Norway have also introduced good practices in this area by implementing monitoring systems and online patrols to report hate speech on social media. Paragraph 14 then looks at effective and inclusive victim support services, and good practices reflecting this can be seen by Albania by creating and implementing a funded legal aid system for victims of prejudice in 2017. Switzerland also reflect this recommendation by offering access to early legal therapy and support through 14 different languages across all cantons, and this was made available by the Network of Therapy Centre for Victims of Racism. And lastly, paragraph 15 looks at providing targeted support services through referral and appropriate funding. One of the best practices in this area can be seen by Hungary, as they set up help points at each border crossing between Ukraine, with personnel stationed offering 24/7 emergency medical treatment, transportation, accommodation, food and legal aid. Additional good practices can be seen by North Macedonia, with the Minister of Labour and Social Policy providing financial aid to nationwide LGBT help centre called Scope J Queer Centre, offering free social care, support, counselling and psychotherapy. And I'll pass you on to Jenna now.
I examined the criminal justice system of the 23 countries who were in the sixth monitoring cycle. The Council of Europe Committee on Experts on Hate Crime urged Member States to ensure that their criminal justice systems and the institutions therein should recognise and address hate crime in their criminal justice processes in order to ensure that the relevant positive obligations are met. A good practice which was seen in a lot of member states were changes to policies, legislation, guidelines and protocols. This was suggested under paragraph 22 of the draft recommendation, and it recommended countries put measures into place to unmask, record and recognise hate crime. 11 of the 23 countries from the sixth monitoring cycle had some form of change, whether that was improvements to already existing processes or implementing changes to their law. Some of the best practices I found were by Denmark and Poland. Denmark fall into the category of implementing changes to their law. They introduced an anti-discrimination policy, which looks to strengthen protections against discrimination on sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. They did so by adding the terms sex characteristics, gender identity, and gender expression to their criminal code as aggravating circumstances, and as well as making name changes easier for transgender people and allowing people under the age of 18 to be marked X in their sex category on their passports. In Poland, they made changes to their criminal code to punish the promotion of totalitarianism, Nazism, communist and fascist ideologies, and hatred based on nationality, ethnicity, race, or religion. These 4 factors are now also aggravating circumstances when it comes to hate crime. Training is another good practice that was present in 9 of the 23 countries. Paragraph 24 of the draft recommendation recommends that member states should identify and respond to prejudice within law enforcement and other criminal justice practitioners. It was recommended with the hope that it will increase trust in the criminal justice system as a whole and those who run it. The best practices I came across in my research were in North Macedonia and Greece. In North Macedonia, authorities participated in training against hate crime for police, judges and prosecutors. Over 2,000 members of the police force took place in this training, which was held by the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. In Greece, a national action plan was implemented against racism and intolerance, which provided police training in academies right before they start the job on discrimination, racism and xenophobia and the rights of LGBT people. I will now pass you to William, who will talk about third-party monitoring and prevention.
Thanks, Jim. I will be talking about third-party reporting mechanisms along with comprehensive monitoring strategies in regard to hate crime. This will entail specific examples of good practices from various European member states showcasing diverse approaches to combating hate crimes. The Council of Europe Committee of Experts on Hate Crime believe by endorsing third-party reporting, it will ensure that victims have access to diverse and accessible avenues for reporting hate crimes, ultimately enhancing victim support and facilitating more comprehensive data collection on hate crimes. Paragraph 48 of the draft recommendation refers to practical avenues for victims to pursue justice for hate crimes, such as hotlines, reporting through public services, support during the reporting process, and online monitoring systems. The countries which have implemented third-party reporting mechanisms that abide by paragraph 48 are Austria, Belgium, Estonia, France, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Poland and Switzerland. I will now talk of 3 of the best practices which have been adopted by Austria, Belgium and Hungary. In Austria, the Against Online Hate Counselling Centre assists victims of online hate with legal remedies and content removal. This initiative has boosted reports of online hate speech. Austria's ICT security portal offers prevention resources across reporting mechanisms. The Anti-Discrimination Office of Styria's Ban Hate app enables reporting and online hate speech. Furthermore, in Ghent, Belgium, the municipal police have established a dedicated contact point for hate-motivated violence against LGBTI individuals, accessible via an electronic mailbox on their website and a telephone hotline for emergencies. In Hungary, the Internet Hotline Service provides a platform for reporting various types of illegal and harmful content, such as online harassment, racism and xenophobia. Additionally, the National Police have been recently supported the Uniform Reporting Platform, led by the prominent LGBTI NGO Hatter Society. This application enables victims and others to directly report hate crimes to the police. Moreover, the Council of Europe's committee advocates for comprehensive monitoring systems to effectively track and address hate crimes within member states. Paragraph 50 of the draft recommendation refers to the necessity for member states to identify, record, monitor and analyse hate crime trends, collaborating with relevant stakeholders as needed in accordance with European human rights and data protection standards. The countries that have complied with this recommendation are Albania, Austria and Georgia. One of the best practices is seen in Austria, where the Federal Minister for Constitutional Affairs, Reforms, Deregulation and Justice concluded an agreement pursuant to which Facebook will check notifications of illegal content regarding the hate speech within 24 hours and remove or lock down such content. Paragraph 52 of the draft recommendation emphasises the importance of member states collecting and analysing anonymised and disaggregated data throughout the entire process of dealing with hate crimes, from reporting to post-conviction support. The countries preempted this recommendation include Bulgaria, Germany, Norway and Switzerland. A great practice is seen in Bulgaria, where a joint workshop by the FRA and ODIHR was held in Sofia in 2019, aimed at enhancing national approaches to official hate crime recording and data collection. The workshop gathered over 30 participants from various sectors, including police, Ministry of Justice, Prosecutor's Office, Judiciary, and relevant NGOs. Finally, paragraph 53 of the draft recommendation stresses the need for transparently sharing statistics and data on hate crimes, complying with European human rights and data protection standards. The country that has adhered to this recommendation is Belgium. In Belgium, extensive data concerning the LGBTI community is gathered through measures implemented by authorities at different administrative levels. These efforts have resulted in surveys and studies showcasing commendable practices in collecting and analysing data on discrimination and racist experiences. I'll now pass you to Rory to talk about prevention.
So it should be said, from the 23 countries who finished their 6th ECTRI cycle, they all had promising prevention practices, but in the interest of time I'll only mention seldom few. The Council of Europe Committee on Experts on Hate Crime laid out various recommendations that Member States should adopt concerning the prevention of hate crime. The Committee wishes for Member States to promote the recommendations of the Committee by engaging in constructive dialogues with stakeholders, both nationally and internationally, to achieve these goals. Including addressing drivers of hate crime, measures for its prevention, and the mitigation of the direct and indirect impacts of hate crime. So the first recommendation in relation to prevention was that Member States should prepare and implement effective strategies and conduct relevant research to explore and address the root causes of hate crime. And from the 6 cycle reports provided by ECRI, the countries of Azerbaijan, Denmark, Estonia, France and Norway have all been seen to have good practices in relation to the above recommendations and to a standard that was satisfactory to ECRI. In particular, Denmark, where a political agreement was reached to establish a digital unit to detect and prevent crimes perpetrated with the use of the internet, and this initiative is also meant to address online hate speech. The second recommendation in relation to prevention was that the committee advised that Member States should take the appropriate steps to improve awareness raising, education, training and the use of counter-speech or alternative discourse measures in order to improve the ability of relevant actors and institutions to identify factors and conduct which could lead to hate crime. Concerning countermeasures, ECRI noted that Bulgaria's practices were of significant success, where the authorities have taken important steps to prevent and combat anti-Semitism in all forms. This is due to Bulgaria becoming a full member of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, adopting a working definition of anti-Semitism, adopting or appointing a national coordinator on combating anti-Semitism, and initiating the development of an action plan. With regards to education and training to politicians and authorities, in Armenia, measures aimed at training relevant professionals and addressing hate speech and hate crime have been taken by the authorities and the civil organisations, notably within the awareness-raising component of their National Plan for the Protection of Human Rights. ECRI noted this to be a particularly good practice. In relation to scholastic education and training, Luxembourg launched an awareness-raising campaign on school bullying and violence in 2021. An awareness-raising campaign to promote acceptance of intersex people was also launched. This promotion of awareness raising and education is no doubt a successful measure in combating hate crime, as will improve the ability of relevant and future actors to identify factors and conduct that may lead to hate crime. Just a moment.
You're nearly
there. The third recommendation the Council recommends is that civil society organisations should be encouraged and supported in their diverse roles as a means to promote social inclusion and tolerance. An example of good practice in this area was North Macedonia, where in early 2021 there's been a new equality body known as the Commission on Prevention and Protection Against Discrimination. And the new law on prevention and protection against discrimination contains more safeguards to ensure the independence of the Commission. The fourth recommendation by the Council was that Member States should ensure that all behaviours and activities on the continuum of hate are robustly responded to. ECRI noted in their 6th cycle that in Azerbaijan, in order to counter online racist hate speech, the law on information and protection of information was amended in 2020 to prohibit internet providers and individuals from distributing any information promoting violence, religious extremism or inciting hatred. Such illegal content must now be taken down and removed within 8 hours, which ECRI noted as a particularly good practice. The fifth and final recommendation concerning prevention was that Member States should protect facilities and events associated with groups targeted by hate crime. This should include measures that can reduce opportunities to commit hate crimes and increase the safety of those groups. In Germany, the authorities have invested many resources in the early integration of the high number of newcomers into Germany. They've also started revising their National Action Plan on integration with a holistic approach that aims at a full inclusion in society. Again, ECRI noted this to be a promising and a good practice. From the 23 countries that have completed their sixth ECRI monitoring cycle, it is evident that many of the practices recommended by the Council of Europe's Committee of Experts on Hate Crime have been proactively addressed. I'll now pass you back over to Isabel.
Sorry, I jumped to the conclusion there too early. But in summary, these are just a few examples of good practices regarding hate crime implemented by the 23 member states. These nations have demonstrated tremendous dedication and should persist in providing these services. Moreover, they should endeavour to introduce additional measures to cultivate a supportive environment for those impacted by hate crimes. An ECRI's monitoring visit to Ireland is taking place in November of this year, and we hope to see more of these good practices implemented by Ireland between now and then. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. It is no small task for undergraduate students to present to such an esteemed audience, and we really, really appreciate the time, energy and professionalism that it took. And I would add that they were absolutely wonderful to work with, all four of you, over the semester. I enjoyed our meetings. It didn't feel like I was going to teach. I was just going to chat with pals every week about hate crime, one of my favourite topics. So thank you all for your work over the semester. The last thing that we have on our schedule today is Professor Nora Lee Kennedy, Vice President of Research. Yes, you did present in front of the Vice President of Research of the University, is going to formally launch our report, which include, our report series and briefing notes. Great, thanks.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I'll be brief. I'm conscious of time and you've had a busy day. I just want to make a few remarks and thank initially, I suppose, Jennifer and Amanda for the invitation, but also for the work involved in the series. It's really fantastic. Research Week, of which this is part of, is an opportunity at the University of Limerick to showcase what we do best. And we do a huge amount of things really, really well. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves there's a lot that we do really well. We do our research really well, we do our teaching really well. And I think we've that exemplified here today with our fabulous for undergraduates. So it's just wonderful to see that elucidated here today. So just thank Jennifer and Amanda again for their leadership in bringing that to the fore. I mean, the European Centre for the Study of Hate Crime is really important for the University of Limerick. I think as a centre, it's fair to say they have an excellent focus on impact and on policy. And that's really important for us as an institution. It's only day 2 of Research Week, but I have to say it's been so energising for the 2 days to visit and listen to, as much as I can, the various talks that are happening. And the energy, the enthusiasm, but also the passion for the research that's being presented by the various presenters is just so wonderful to see. And again, you see that here today. So I want to acknowledge all that. I want to acknowledge, again, I suppose, the involvement of the students and why that's so important. Really important for you as individuals, really important for us as an institution, that we have the opportunity, I suppose, for you to get involved in research, to see what that means, but also to connect with research and to have the opportunity to work with 2 active researchers who are bringing their new knowledge into the classroom. So we are about generating new knowledge, and that's a real live example of that. So thank you for your participation. I'm sure you've learned a huge amount from it, and the opportunity to work with Jennifer and Amanda and colleagues is really valuable. So well done to you for your contribution. Thank you, folks. I'd like to congratulate you on your action series. It's lovely to see a tangible output. I will take this with me. But it's lovely to see that I understand you're generating a good lot of interest externally and with European colleagues, and ECRI I understand are quite interested in the outcomes of this. So that's a really good piece of connectivity for us externally. I'm really keen that our excellent researchers get the opportunity to showcase themselves. And Amanda and Jennifer need no encouragement, and let me be clear about that. They're already well leading the way. They need no pushing, and I think that's really important. I said that as an earlier event, to have leaders who are proactive, who are hungry for doing more and driving that is really important and really valuable to see. And I'm sure Lucianne and Tina share my enthusiasm. When that passion is evident, the hardest thing sometimes is in supporting it as best you can. And there's loads more we could do, but having it present is just so important for driving on and evolving. So I will pause and finish by congratulating you all and say I'm delighted to help you launch your action series today, and congratulations and well done to you all for your involvement. Thank you all. Great. Well done, Jennifer. Well done. Great.
We'll actually keep this.
Oh, you won't let me have it. Will you post me one though?
I'll post you
I was
one.
about to take away. That's well done.
Can I just say a few thanks, and then I will let you go, because I know Kevin in particular is very anxious to get his bus. Thank you to the students for presenting, but also thank you to our brilliant interns, Val and Jacob, who have been working with us exceptionally over the semester. Organising us. I asked for sellotape, they knew exactly where it was, as well as making sure that all our citations and work is accurate. Yvonne, thank you for all the work. Where is Yvonne? She's outside. Thank you to Yvonne for organising Research Week, for a brilliant and inspirational ADR who's been so supportive of the work of the centre. Thank you to Nora Lee for attending. And also thanks to UL, because challenging hate has become quite politicised, both nationally and internationally. And for UL to, well, we didn't exactly ask, but to allow us to have a centre for the study of hate marks us out internationally, because this type of work is actually being closed down internationally rather than being allowed to flourish and foster. So thank you to UL for... who made us a priority research centre as well, and have supported us. So thank you to you all, and thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you at our event on Thursday on Indigenous Criminology, which is a public lecture by Dr. Cindy Joyce. So thank you all very much.